And that's where we begin our conversation this morning with the director at the Eco Electricity Distribution Company, Mr. George Etomi. Good morning, Mr. Etomi. Thanks for coming on the program. So you were part of that investigative hearing by the Senate yesterday, and one issue that appeared evident is the blame game among stakeholders in the sector, particularly the management of operation or management of generation companies, distribution companies, and the transmission company of Nigeria, who presented contradictory positions on the poor state of power in the country. So I want to ask you, what exactly is the problem here?
Well, the real problem in the sector is that there has been a misalignment. After the privatization of the generating companies and the distribution companies, the transmission company of Nigeria was meant to be concessioned. That did not happen. And so it was still wholly left with the government. And what you then find are misalignments between the intentions from the supply end, that is starting with the gas producers through to the generating companies, and then before it gets to the discos. So what you now find is the blame game. So hopefully with the presidential task force now set up, we can begin to look at these areas of misalignments. But from the distribution company end of things, the reason why most people call on the discos is because they are the face of the industry. They are the ones who interact with the customers. But many people do not know what goes on behind the scenes. It is this alignment we are seeking to achieve. If you speak to most of the market participants, even amongst those who are in the government side of things, say TCN, NBET, even the BP, hardly do you speak to any one of them and you get a feeling that they understand the policy of government, which itself it's flip-flops. And then we have regulatory issues as well. The regulator tries to give teeth to any government policy, but when the inconsistency starts with the policy itself, regulation is affected. So we've had regulatory inconsistencies as well. One moment you are told to have fixed charges, the moment this next time the fixed charges are removed, another time they will have a tariff review, then they will say, oh, please don't implement it. And each day, because power is a wasting asset, each day you delay decisions like that, the funding gap becomes wider and wider. And of course, as you know, the fundamental problem in the value chain is liquidity. When you ask that distributors sell a product for less than its cost, and you don't give them a clear sight about how this difference will be met, these are the problems you meet.
And this brings us to the issue of the tariff review. Of course, recently, the Minister of Power, Salim Ahmed, made it clear that the new increment on electricity tariff will take effect in July. But the question on the lips of many is, why is there a need to increase electricity tariff in the first place?
There is a need to increase. I just wonder about the July 1 date, because in the middle of a pandemic, that would be a very difficult proposition to sell. But there is a need for a tariff increase, and that is because the bane of the sector is, as I told you, is that the cost of the product is actually the cost at which we sell, the price at which we sell the product is below the cost. Nigeria is the only country where electricity is priced so low. Ghana, Togo, all our neighboring countries, they buy power at the published rate. And this is what we should be doing. And that was the intention of the privatization. The idea was at the beginning that we would have a cost-reflective regime, and then we will then begin to align all the other things that make that happen. Metering, for example, is one of them, because metering, like I told you, is what creates the trust between the consumer and the distribution company. But even that, too, has been stalled because of, again, what I call policy inconsistency. We had CAPME, the Credited Advance Payment Metering implementation. That was ongoing, and then suddenly the regulator stopped it and introduced MAP, the meter asset provider. Now, in the middle of the meter asset provider trying to get in meters, the regulator sets a price ceiling for the meter. The meters come into the country, they slam them with customs duty that makes that product more expensive than what the regulator has already published. So it's a complete disincentive for anybody to work in such a market. So the meter asset provider scheme has not taken off. The only way you can get meters now is if a consumer is willing to pay the full cost of the meter, which will be so slow, because the idea behind MAP is that you will roll out meters in a mass fashion and then you work out a repayment scheme over a 10-year period. But I don't see that happening in the face of inconsistencies. And let us not forget the foreign exchange fluctuation as well. When all these things were being done, privatization, foreign exchange was 156, 157. It moved up to 199, then to 306, to 360. Now, in the parallel market, is close to 450. How do you then price a product? Power is the only product that continues to remain what it is in spite of the macroeconomic changes all around them. These are the things MITO is meant to fix. But each time that's about to be done, for largely what I call political reasons, because of the sensitivity of electricity in political calculations, it is not done. And for as long as we don't do it, the burden is left with the federal government. Now enter COVID, enter oil price collapse. There's actually no more money to continue to support the sector, which is the reason you find this flurry of activities now to do what we should have done, in my opinion, 5, 6, 7 years ago, by which time you would have had some sustained implementation that will attract investments, that will ultimately then stabilize the sector. But like they say, the best time to do something was 5 years ago. The next best time is today. So we need to start today. There is a need for a price increase, but we must be sensitive to the times we live in. Hopefully, we can delay that for some time until we then get complete alignment. For example, you must have heard about the service reflective tariff. This tariff increase is actually predicated on service delivery, which means distribution companies are expected to guarantee a certain minimum of power supply to consumers and then charge appropriately for that. For that to happen, there are 5 bands being introduced: 4 hours, 6, I think 8, 16, 20, and so forth, and all that. So you now sign service levels agreements with these consumers, such that if you do not deliver those expected hours of supply, then you pay for it. In other words, the consumer pays for what he gets, which on paper is very good and which we support. But before that will work successfully, we must align the value chain. For example, if with all the best of intentions, the distribution company wants to give you 20 hours, and then we have a systems collapse from the transmission company, what happens? Who bears that cost? We're taking up this issue with the regulator. He says they will make the transmission company pay, but we know it's a government agency. They have very little control over them. So we need to get a proper alignment, because this is what the DISCOs have proposed right from the outset. In fact, it was the basis for the privatization. So we need to get to where we need to get to, but we also need to look at where we are today. That we're in the middle of a pandemic. We need to have some human face to whatever we're doing. But for now, as the DISCOs begin to segment their markets, as we are beginning to have conversations with the value chain for the first time, everybody is now talking, we can begin to straighten out all the loose ends until we then start off. And when we start off, you begin to hold everybody to their contracts. Right now, the misalignment is too much.
Now, assuming the new tariff comes into effect on July the 1st now, are you saying that that will guarantee an improvement in power supply?
Not across the board, and that's the reason I said that we need time to make all the adjustments that needs to be done. Because you need, for example, the regulator is telling us if the new tariffs come into place, then DISCOs will be expected to pay in full for whatever power is given to them. For that to happen, the DISCOs themselves want to know that there won't be disruptions from TCN. We need to know that the MDAs will pay their debts. We need to know how our books can be cleaned up, as was promised us at privatization, because all the debt in the sector is on our books. You keep hearing 1.7 trillion spent on the power sector. As the Senate chair on power explained to you, most of these debt monies went to legacy debts. They had nothing to do with what's going on currently. So we need to, again, using the word alignment, we need to align the entire sector. Now there are serious discussions going on, I can assure you, and it's really the way we want it to be. But we need for time for all these things to straighten out. Guarantee will be a problem. The only other way it can be guaranteed is if discos get alternative power, which may be very expensive. But if consumers can tolerate it, we can try. But we need to move forward from where we are today.
But how much time do we have? Because consumers just want steady power supply. So how much time do we have to actually straighten these alignments that you've been talking about?
It will be incremental. It's not as if it's not started already. I'm sure you know of Magodo, it started. Even within the Eco Electricity Distribution Company, we have consumers who get today up to 23 hours a day. It's already started. It was not massively deployed because of the tariff. There are consumer groups who meet us, who approach us today to say, look, give us the power and we will pay. And we're talking to those ones, and we're accelerating deployments. But you also do not want to discriminate in the market. Just like you are willing to give people 23 hours because it's germane to their business, you also don't want to neglect another group simply because they can't afford it. So we must try to achieve some degree of equity in the distribution of electricity. That's why you see it ranges from 4 hours. Some people will make do with 6 to 8 hours as long as it's given to them at the point at which they need it, until such a time as we can begin to do overall ramping up. Right now, the generating companies say they have 7,000 megawatts that they can deploy if it can be taken by TCN and the distribution companies. So let's go for that. That's partially what the Siemens arrangement is targeting. So let's go for that. But ultimately, the moment we reach that stage, you must also be thinking about how you can also ramp up distribution. Because if you look at the overall requirements in Nigeria for a 200 million population, even our generating levels are abysmally low. As an index of development, sustainable development goals tell you that for any country to develop steadily, you must have at least 1,000 megawatts to 1 million of your population, which means Nigeria should be looking anything towards 200,000 megawatts. In South Africa, where they have a population of 59 million thereabout, they have 45,000 megawatts. There's some degree of relationship between the population and the electricity they produce, and has a direct impact on their economic development. So what holds the key to the diversification of our economy is steady electricity, and I think that is where we will begin to do it. But I also urge consumers to pay, because many times people only look at the distribution companies. There are consumers who habitually refuse to pay for electricity. They would rather invest in bypassing and gaming the system than pay. It's ingrained in not everybody, but it's in many, many people. So as everybody begins to brace up what I call the post-COVID response to the electricity market, we must all play our part. That your neighbor you know who is stealing power and you don't report, you will invariably bear his cost. So we must all put our hands on the deck.
All right, Mr. Itomi, you touched on the Siemens deal, of course, and the federal government, of course, we know that had signed an agreement with Siemens in July last year, a letter of agreement on the Nigerian electrification roadmap with the aim of ramping up electricity generation in the country to 25,000 megawatts in 6 years. And now the National Economic Council is saying that there is an urgent need for technical and financial audits of the discos in the country before interventions coming from Siemens, the World Bank, and the others. What's your opinion about this?
Well, this is a very sensitive area. Again, there are too many. We have one regulator, which is the National Electricity Regulatory Commission, but too many pronouncements are coming from too many quarters. Some are politically motivated. Some, yes, there is an urgency to get things done. You see, the net effect is that it creates confusion in the marketplace. For as long as we think that power is limited to this environment, we can do whatever we like. But the truth is that the deep pockets who will come and invest in a sustainable market or in a sustainable manner are put off by these inconsistent pronouncements. We got a letter from the regulator saying they want to audit, do a forensic audit. The matter is in court, so I'm actually very reluctant to pronounce on it. But we want to be sure what this audit is meant to achieve, really, because they do open book exercises. They've done it every year since we got privatized. I don't know what the audit is meant to, we don't know what it's meant to achieve. It's such a distraction from the main business. There is illiquidity in the sector, and we need to address it. Everybody who knows about power knows that that mismatch is the main reason for the problem. Let's go and deal with it dispassionately. Why are the ministries, departments, and agencies not paying for power? It's not right. And you take them out of the power equation, it increases the ATC and C losses for the discos, and yet discos cannot recover it. It's just such, these are the misalignments I'm talking about. Let us all come back and straighten it. These are Nigerians who've invested in their country. They need to be protected. They need to feel that their efforts are appreciated. But every time it's just been pointing, accusing fingers. They have done this, they have done that. No facts. Everybody's an expert in power, and everybody just says what comes first to them, not minding the effect on the investments and the overall investment climate in the country. Because if you've signed agreements, you don't respect them. The sanctity of contract is so important. Nobody will take us seriously internationally. You can't sign contracts and then walk away from them.
Mr. George Itomi, thanks. I know that this conversation could go on and on, but we're pressed for time and we need to wrap up at this time. Thank you so much for coming on Business Morning, and to enjoy the rest of your day.
My pleasure.